Yes. Pornography and masturbation are so common in our society today, so common, but it's not really spoken of in the church very often. Um, Outside of the church, in our society, pornography and masturbation are treated as something perfectly normal. They make jokes about it. Um, Men and women both do. It's just considered a normal thing that men do, but it's not. Not That's not how the church sees it at all. And so when men come with this, and sometimes it's even to the point of being an addiction, um, it's a problem that we really have to address and we have to talk about it. But first of all, let me just say that being able to talk about it is the first step in healing. Because for many young men and older men, it's something they do not talk about, not with a priest. They might joke about it with their buddies in a very impersonal way, but they would not talk to their priest about it. They wouldn't bring it up at all. Um, I confess a lot of people, and this is one of those issues that usually the men don't want to speak about. Um, they'll have other ways of talking about it. When they finish their confession, they'll say something like, well, Father, there's all those other sins, that I don't really want to talk about. So I have to try to guess what those other sins are. Hopefully I can get him to talk about that. But what I'm getting at is talking about it, saying it to your priest is the first healthy step in healing this problem. The demons love secrets. Let's establish that for sure. The demons love secrets. They love you to keep things inside, no matter what it is. This especially carnal sins, because then they can work on you. Then they can fan the flames of that sin. Then it can grow and spread like a cancer in your body. It can harden your heart, and it can darken your mind, can affect your thinking and your ability to love. It really can, if you don't talk about these things um, with your spiritual father. I think that this specific problem of pornography and masturbation is also related to what we discussed earlier about the declining masculinity in our country. I think that men have become afraid of powerful women, afraid to have relationships. It's much easier to have a quote relationship with pornography and masturbation than it is to have a relationship with a real woman, with a real human being. That's not, that takes work and honesty. And I think men have become afraid of that, afraid of it. So it's easier to watch porn. And for those men who are married, porn can very easily become a substitute for them for having the marital act with their wife. So for a married man, it's tragic also, and it's very damaging to his marriage. And for the single man, it becomes a substitute for building a healthy relationship with a woman. It becomes a substitute for that. It takes the place of a real relationship with a woman that involves all of the give and take that's involved with having a relationship with a real human being. And lastly, I want to say about this particular issue that in the church, it is something that generally we don't speak about. And that's not healthy, spiritually healthy. That as I said earlier, people don't even mention it to their spiritual father. Young men, even old men who have this problem, don't mention it. There's a great deal of shame involved with this, and it's unhealthy shame. And the longer it stays in, the worse it gets. It becomes almost impossible to talk about. So I would encourage priests to help their spiritual children to be able, if they suspect that this is the problem, to help them to be able to talk about that, and try to avoid anything that can be interpreted as shaming them. Shame is not the way to really defeat sin. Shame can produce a lot of guilt, but it can actually increase the occasion of sin. Through love and care and through faith, but most of all through prayer, that's how sin is defeated. Through staying closer and closer to Christ, through the sacraments of confession and Holy Communion. This is how real healing takes place. Our monastery has experienced phenomenal growth. It really has, and we thank God for that. It's God's grace. It's not that we have anything special. I certainly don't have anything special. What's drawing people to the monastery is, I believe, is seeing a community of men living together peacefully, supporting each other in our desire to follow Christ above all else, in our desire to be faithful to Him in all things, and to minister with love to the pilgrims who come to the monastery, to pray with us, to be prayed for, and to work alongside of us, and to get to know us. And that's what I think has really caused our community to grow as much as it has. We want to be really open to our pilgrims, by the way. We have a certain Benedictine spirit here. The rule of St. Benedict says, "Let every guest to the monastery be received as Christ." And this is what I teach my monks. Let every guest be received as Christ. How would you treat Christ? I know it's the custom in some monasteries that only the abbot and the guest master speak to guests, but not in our monastery. I encourage all the monks to be warm and friendly with the guests as is appropriate, to answer their questions, to be polite to them, to help them. And that's had a tremendous impact, I believe. I've certainly heard from so many guests, so many pilgrims, that they felt welcome. They were so happy to be part of our prayer life and working alongside of the brothers on various jobs, and this has been something that I believe is really important for us to do. And I think the result of that is that the number of pilgrims has just kept increasing and increasing. So with the brotherhood growing and the number of pilgrims increasing, our little church, it's really more of a chapel, has become absolutely inadequate, totally, completely inadequate. When we have hierarchical liturgies, it's amazing. One priest friend of mine who comes to the monastery quite a bit says, I'm not going to come anymore for hierarchical liturgies. I'm claustrophobic. I can't take that being packed in shoulder to shoulder for hours in your tiny little altar. So that was his response to it. But it's about time that we have a church that's adequate for a monastery our size with the number of pilgrims that we have. And we heard a lot of really good things about Andrew Gould, who's a church architect. And a few years ago, we contacted him, and he came and visited us, and we told him what our needs were. And he designed a beautiful church for us, this sort of Byzantine/Russian church. And we like it very, very much, very much. Um, the outside of the church is almost finished. Everything is pretty much finished on the outside except for the gold cupolas that are going to be coming sometime soon. I think maybe next month. The domes are up and as green roofing material on it, on the domes and on the flat parts of the roof, and the walls are all stuccoed and painted a kind of an off-white color, so it's green and sort of white, and then the cupolas will be gold, and it should look very beautiful. And on the inside of the church, even though it's not close to being done or being used for services yet, but our choir has sung in there just to see what the sound was like. And I can tell you the sound is just phenomenal. It's just incredible. Our little choir sounds totally different in this magnificent church with this huge dome and the transepts. It's an incredible sound. You can look on our 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 Facebook page or our YouTube page, and you can see examples and hear examples. It's quite remarkable. So entering the church, even though it's not frescoed, even though there isn't even an altar in there yet, a holy table, there's a sacredness about this space that I think our architect knows a great deal about theology, the theology of architecture, the theology of light, and it shows in his work in this incredible, incredible church. When we started building the church, a lot of the locals, the construction company that we got, the Leach Construction Company was from Huntington, the local big city, but lots of the workers lived out in the country, and they had to drive. Some of them had to drive quite a long ways to come here every day to work on this church. But as the workers began to be here longer and longer, we got to know them and interact with them, and we were amazed that some of them said, "I've never worked on anything like this before. I've built plenty of Walmarts and banks and libraries, but never a church like this. Never. I've never built a dome before. I've never built an archway before. And the church is filled with beautiful stone arches and huge columns. And they've never done any of this before, but they've done a magnificent job, and they want to do this. And they're happy to be part of this. They know it's something special, something really, really special." It reminds me of something I read. Abbot Gregorius from the Holy Mountain, I believe it was, said that when you enter a proper Orthodox church, that means architecturally it was built to be an Orthodox church, and is frescoed. That church tells you who you are and who you are in relationship to Christ, the Mother of God, and the saints. And no one has to explain that to you. It just happens. So when you walk into a proper Orthodox church, and God willing, when our church is finally frescoed, whenever that may be, when all of that comes about, our church will speak like this abbot said. When you come into a proper Orthodox church, you can just stand there. When you look up, In the great dome, there is Christ, blessing his flock with his hands. Very powerful. You look toward the altar, you look east, and behind the altar is the Mother of God with her arms raised in prayer to her Son, for this whole flock that's gathered in the church that you're a part of. And then on the walls around you are all the saints and their glowing halos. They're on the level where you are. They're one of you. They're telling you who you are now. You're one of us. You're called to be one of us with these glowing halos, all being prayed for by the Mother of God and all being blessed by her divine Son up above. And you learn all of that just by standing in that church. What a powerful experience that is. What a really powerful experience that is. And I think people are beginning to sense that even here in our environment. I'll tell you, where my Kelia is, I have a perfect view of the new church. The new church is built right in the middle of the monastery. And from my Kelia, I can look out my windows and I see it every morning. And every morning, I say to myself, this is a miracle. This is really, really a miracle. We are not a wealthy community at all, not at all. But this church has been built by people who love God and people who love us and people who want a church like this, a traditional church with domes and cupolas like churches should be. And they want to help us do this. We couldn't do this on our own. It would be impossible for us. In reality, the truth is we're just poor monks who live in a holler of West Virginia. That's all we are. And we lived in our tiny little chapel for many, many years, packed in like sardines and packed into our tiny trapeza too. And that was fine. That was fine. But eventually got to the point where we just couldn't do it anymore. And by God's grace, Andrew Gould came along, and we now have what's going to be a very, very beautiful church, something we're certainly not worthy of, but something that will nourish the flock, the pilgrims that come here. Beside nourishing the brotherhood, it will nourish the flock also. The acoustics in the church are phenomenal, as I said. Everything else is really very otherworldly. I invite you, please come and visit. Please come and see what God is doing in this little holler of West Virginia for us poor West Virginia holler monks, because it really is amazing. It is truly amazing what's going on here. And we feel very blessed to be part of it, and very blessed because we know this is God's doing, and we know that so many people have contributed to this godly event, and that's why it's happening. So we thank you very much, and we invite you to come and join us and pray with us, visit the monastery.